Chapter 3, Meeting at Hogwarts. Disclaimer, same all, reposted with revisions November 1, 2006. Severus woke with a start. The mark on his forearm was throbbing unpleasantly, and a tiny blue duck was hovering in front of him, quacking. Dumbledore's code had to be the product of some sugar-induced hallucination. He swung himself out of bed and dragged the robe over his head, then grabbed the duck. He hit the floor of the headmaster's office with a thud, smirking blearily as several more thuds and cries of pain heralded the rest of the arrivals. His response time was still the best. "Please, take a seat," Albus said. He gestured with one trembling hand. Severus took in the headmaster's tired eyes and pinched mouth with a glance. Something had gone terribly wrong. Harry Potter is missing. A wizard took him from his relative's home 9 hours ago. Severus clutched at his forearm and screwed his eyes shut, swallowing bile. His stomach was churning and he could feel a migraine forming. Around him the Order demanded explanations. "How did this happen? You swore to me he was safe there, you daft old bastard." Sirius Black was in a fury. "Oh Merlin, Harry, we have to find him," Molly Weasley wailed. "But towards a broken bar." "Albus, what happened?" Minerva asked, brow furrowed. "Shut up you lot, shut up," Moody yelled, firing off a deafening bang from his wand. The Order subsided. "We managed to retrieve a memory from the Muggle's mind," the Orderer continued. He poured a silver stream of memory into a bowl inscribed with runes. A ghostly image of a man of late middle years floated above the bowl. "Does anyone recognize this man?" the Order murmured and shook their heads. Moody grunted. "Polyjuice, likely." The gathered witches and wizards continued to fret and seethe. Severus gritted his teeth against the pain in his head. It felt like some loathsome parasite was trying to tear itself free. "Severus, is something wrong?" Albus' soft voice roused him. Severus opened his eyes, then scowled when he realized the entire room was staring at him. He jerked his sleeve up, burying the mark. The snake was writhing in an obscene dance of pleasure, and the skull now wore a black, spiked crown. "The hell?" Black gasped. "Voldemort found an heir. He's made himself Lord Slytherin." And the memories came rushing back. He was vaguely aware of Albus' soft voice and Mad Eye herding the twittering crowd through the door. "It's Harry, isn't it Severus?" came the werewolf's soft voice. "Harry can't be the heir of Slytherin. Serious, he's a Parselmouth." "Holy fuck," Albus said soothingly. "It is a possibility, but this may be a coincidence. I have thoroughly researched Harry's family tree, and have found no sign that a broken bar. He's Voldemort's grandson." Snape's bitter laugh filled the room. Twice. Chapter 4, Son of 3. Disclaimer, there are some things money can't buy. Reposted with revisions November 1, 2006. Explain. Snape, barked Moody. "It's a broken bar complex," Severus hedged. "Most things worth knowing are," Albus said. Severus took a deep breath. 19-year-old Severus Snape ran wondering fingers over the mark so recently burned into his flesh. It had been unpleasant, certainly, but it was worth it. He had met many important people in the post-induction celebration, and the Dark Lord had requested a private meeting with him. Steeling himself, he tapped softly on his lord's office door. "Enter," the rich baritone voice said. Severus closed the door softly behind him and stood at attention in front of his lord. The man was strikingly handsome. Wavy dark hair, a chiseled jaw, broad shoulders and a narrow waist. An elegant hand reached and gently touched his hair. "Welcome home, my son." Severus scrubbed at his face. Voldemort was methodical and very paranoid. "He researched pureblood genealogies and picked my mother, Eileen Prince, to bear his son. Sebastian Snape was sterile, thanks to a curse." The Princes and the Snapes were both old, dark families, and both had covertly sided with Grindelwald during the war. "My mother and stepfather were never convicted, but several of their relatives were. Both families lost most of their wealth and power. He convinced Eileen bear his son, and Sebastian to raise me as his own, as befitted the heir of an old if recently impoverished pureblood family. He bound them to never reveal the secret, and only told me when I'd been marked and sworn to him. He never, as far as I know, contacted either of them after my conception. I think he was convinced that any child of his would be a target for both his enemies and his many unscrupulous allies." "Crazy fucker," murmured Sirius, looking at him with a strange sort of empathy. "Oh, it doesn't end there." "Father, I don't understand." "She's a mudblood," The woman she thinks is her mother is actually her birth mother's squib cousin. Her mother went into hiding, and left Lily with the squib and her muggle husband to protect her. Severus felt a surge of vindication. Lily Evans' charm, intelligence, and magical power had seemed to be a point in favor of the Muggle race. If two Muggles could produce a witch of such brilliance, there was something wrong with this crusade. But now, knowing Thesa Brokenbar, it all made sense. He still couldn't believe she had wasted herself on Potter, of all people. But his father, his liege, was offering him a chance to correct that, to an extent. So Potter and Evans will be raising their sworn enemy's grandchild? He smiled, and offered a tentative joke. I thought Slytherins were snakes, not cuckoos. Voldemort laughed softly. We can learn a trick or two from other Glairs. Our agents stalked Lily for months. Whenever the opportunity presented itself, they would slip her a combination lust and befuddlement potion. They would then summon me and a broken bar. He cleared his throat, trying to force himself to continue. 16 years later, and he still burned with shame and self-loathing at the memories. Our agents in the Order have confirmed it. Lily Potter is expecting. The Dark Lord smiled at Severus' anxious look. Do not fret, Severus. Several of our agents are quite close to the Potters. They will be watching out for Heir Brokenbar, and when my heir comes, the child as well. Father, how can you be so certain that this child will be your heir? Severus failing in that area was still a source of shame for him. But to give his father an heir, a true heir to the Slytherin line, that itself was an honor. Voldemort gave him a strange, secretive smile. You aren't the only child I tucked away, Severus. Severus' vision swam. He clutched convulsively at the arms of his charm, struggling against the vomit trying to crawl its way up his throat. Dimly, he heard, I chose a dark witch to carry my son, and a light witch to carry my daughter. Dear God, Albus breathed. Severus scrubbed at his face. He told me that Lily's birth mother was Katerina Montclair. Her birth name was, incidentally, Lilith, after Adam's first wife. Voldemort said he insisted. He took a steadying breath. When Montclair realized who the father of her child was, she gave the child to Susan and Michael Evans. Susan was a distant squib relative of Montclair's. Montclair spent the next decade leading Voldemort's men on a merry chase, muddying the trail so much that, when she finally took her own life to escape them, they had no idea at all of where the child was. He rubbed the back of his hand over his mouth, trying to quell the urge to vomit. Voldemort believed that the more Slytherin blood the child had, the better chances of producing an heir. They sat in silence for a moment, contemplating Voldemort's convoluted scheme. Finally, Black whispered, but why did he kill Lily, and try to kill Harry? It seems our first attempt was fruitless. That child is definitely a Potter. It was impossible to deny. The newborn's head was covered in the hereditary Potter bird's nest hair. The Dark Lord seemed calm enough, but Severus knew that the Dark Lord loathed it when he was thwarted by such small vagaries of chance. Perhaps, Father a broken bar, but he is still a Slytherin. He might be your heir. Even though the child was Potter's, Severus had thought of it as his for so long that he found himself unable to let go. Perhaps not a son, but a nephew. That wasn't so bad. He carried a photo of the babe taken by one of their spies mere hours after the child was born. Voldemort stared down at the bustling Muggle street 20 stories below him. Mothers grieving for a lost child often rush to fill that gap, he mused. Father, you can't. He's your grandson. Voldemort's sharp gesture cut him off. You have potions to brew, Severus. I managed to polyjuice myself as one of Lily's colleagues from Street Mungo's, and she let me hold Harry. I pinched a few of his hairs and brewed the heritage potion. As the potion simmered, Severus remembered the feel of the tiny infant in his arms. He didn't care if the child had that damn Potter hair. He had felt the connection between them. The potion flashed once and gave off a puff of smoke. He gently ladled some onto a sheet of specially prepared parchment. The potion wiggled across the page, spelling out Harry's name in spidery script. Harrison James Potter, Lilith Marie Montclair, James Nicholas Potter. Severus let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Disappointment and a strange relief. That green-eyed child was not his broken bar, and therefore was not a product of incest. Rape, Severus. He chastised himself. Call it what it was. Slowly, however, a fourth name was emerging. Severus Galileo Snape. Harry has two fathers? Black's voice broke on the last word. Black magic. Filthy stuff, Moody muttered. Severus, How is this possible? Albus asked gently. The Dark Lord knew that there was no way that we could guarantee that he swallowed thickly, would be the one to bed Lily during her fertile time. He was fascinated with the mating habits of certain snakes, and developed a spell to recreate the effects of these habits in humans. Some female snakes will mate with a dozen or more male snakes over a few days. They store the seed inside of themselves for time, during which the sperm will attempt to kill off their competitors. Voldemort used this spell so that Lily's body would retain a broken bar. I think we understand, Severus, Albus said softly. Severus poured himself more tea and sipped the still scalding liquid, avoiding meeting anyone's eyes, absurdly grateful that he had been spared this small indignity. Severus nodded. Thank you, Albus. I believe that somehow, this spell instead served to fuse our seed, creating a child from all of our genetic material. Truly remarkable, Albus murmured. Remarkable, Black screamed. Remarkable. This abomination a broken bar. Lupin shoved the ranting Black back into his seat. Shut up, Sirius. Still doesn't explain why Voldemort offed Lily, Moody griped. He didn't know. Severus spooned some of the potion into a vial. It was labeled calming potion, but it would do. This little deviation from his usual protocol certainly wouldn't slip his mind. He cast a powerful, and wholly excessive, he would admit, cushioning charm on the vial and headed up to Voldemort's study. Father, a broken bar. Petrificus totalis. Voldemort's power locked Severus into place. He smoothed Severus' hair, sweaty from hours spent over a hot cauldron, smiling fondly at him. I admire your dedication to family, Severus, but I simply can't permit you to indulge this sentimentality. There will be other children. Obliviate. Severus blinked and swayed, gripping the back of a chair to keep himself upright. Forgive me, my lord, I am uncertain what came over me. The Dark Lord waved his apology away. Not to worry, Snape, you are looking a bit peaked. Go get a meal and some rest. Your potions can wait until tomorrow. Severus bowed deeply and left, wondering why he felt so uneasy. Walking back to his rooms, he pulled a vial of calming potion from his pocket. Obviously an off-batch, he murmured, studying the strange color and texture. Opening the door to his workroom, he grimaced at the cauldron full of botched potion. He banished the lot, then headed to his rooms for some rest. He removed all of my knowledge of our family connection. Even without that knowledge, I still felt uneasy. I seized on the life debt I owed Potter as an excuse for my concern, and that is when I came to you, Albus. He added lemon, milk, cream, and sugar to his tea, then occupied himself stirring the now undrinkable mess. Assuming Lord Voldemort told Potter the truth of his defeat, I assume that Lily threw herself in front of a curse meant for Harry. Perhaps mere frustration drove him to attempt to murder the child as well. He was a broken bar far from stable. Towards the end, Dumbledore appeared engrossed in one of the silvery machines on his desk. He gently flicked a wheel, sending the machine into a busy, chiming motion whose purpose entirely eluded Severus. Well? Black demanded impatiently. I can see only one option before us, for now. Severus, when Voldemort calls you in his Death Eaters, Severus always appreciated the way Albus never referred to him as a Death Eater. You must attempt to ascertain Harry's condition. I doubt that Voldemort would harm his heir, so Harry is safe enough for now. Black spluttered and fumed. The werewolf looked even older than normal. Moody merely nodded. Chapter 5, Tea with the Dark Lord, edited and reposted November 17, 2006. The first section is new. Minor proofreading to the rest. Their new child wiggled and flailed in a most annoying fashion. The potential was there. The rarity that marked this boy as theirs. But it was shielded, the boy's magic struggling to cover it, to bar them from connecting. They petted him gently, trying to soothe away the fear. Finally, his consciousness flickered out, and with it the resistance. Eagerly they rushed into him, saturating his body and magic with their own power and essence. Freed of the conscious will's loathing, the magic reached for them just as eagerly. Immense power, sadly underdeveloped and nearly crippled by self-doubt, began its long-denied birth. The physical shell had suffered even more than the magic. It was damaged and fragile, and showed evidence extensive subconscious magical repair. Ever so gently, they began the slow process of restoration and improvement. Once he had been remade in their image, he would love them, and they would be whole. Voldemort frowned into the pool. The surface remained smooth as glass while the serpents below had Harry swaddled in a maelstrom. Occasionally the churning mass would reveal a limp hand or leg, but the boy had remained mostly out of sight for the last hour. His own ride had only taken 10 minutes. But then, he'd been a willing participant. Finally, after more than 2 hours, the watery serpents stilled and melted away. A gentle current bore the limp body to the surface. Voldemort slid into the pool and caught the boy's fine-boned wrist in one hand while the other kept a firm grip on the rocky edge of the pool. He had no idea how deep the waters were, and no desire to find out. He gently laid the unconscious boy on his belly on the stone floor, and gave his back a few hard thumps. The small form gave a few racking coughs, spewing up an impressive amount of water. A section no snakes. A section the boy hissed, blinking blearily up at Voldemort after examining the water he'd vomited. A section the snakes are gone. A section Voldemort assured him. The boy struggled to his knees, panting and coughing weakly. The Dark Lord knelt and scooped his new heir into his arms, carrying Harry to the suite he'd chosen for him. The exhausted boy faded in and out of consciousness, occasionally mumbling to himself in Parseltongue. Voldemort laid the child on a bed made up with luxurious, softly scented bedding. The serpents had ripped his silken ritual robe to shreds in their frenzy to bond the boy to them. He cast a few charms to dry and warm him, then vanished the tattered garment. Nude, Harry's fragility was frighteningly apparent. He was underweight and heavily bruised. Had he not known the boy's birthday, he would not have credited him with 12 years, much less 15. Voldemort had seen the damage during the ritual bath, but now he made careful note of each wound. He would have a thorough accounting very soon. The serpent's markings reflected in the light. Voldemort counted over a dozen of the markings, more than he himself had been blessed with. While his were like polished steel, Harry's were pale, and glinted like mother of pearl. They were barely visible unless the light hit them just right, and then it appeared that a dozen tiny serpents were winding over the boy's body. He touched the marking on the boy's shoulder, gently stroking it with just his forefinger, feeling the almost imperceptible texture of scales. Reluctantly, he pulled himself away and tucked the boy in snugly, then left the room, locking the door behind him. Harry slowly returned to awareness, coaxed from sleep by warm, savory smells. His stomach cramped in painful hunger. Memory flooded back, and he bolted upright, scanning the room for danger. The room reminded him of Hogwarts, though it lacked the shabbiness that centuries of hard use by rambunctious students had given the school. With some relief he spotted a dressing gown draped over the foot of his enormous bed. He scrambled into it and set about exploring his surroundings, ignoring the tempting smells from the dome tray in his complaining stomach. Apparently, Harry's host was planning on a long-term guest. Harry's suite contained a bathroom, a breakfast nook, a study area, and a dressing room. The only thing it lacked was an exit. Harry lifted the silver dome from the tray. The meal was small, but after his summer with the Dursleys and Dudley's diet, it was wonderful. Harry devoured the soup, bread, and steamed vegetables with unseemly haste. Though the meal had been small, he felt uncomfortably full. Considering that he usually ate himself sick at Hogwarts' welcoming feasts, he supposed that Voldemort was being eerily considerate of his health. He rose and restlessly roamed through the suite a second time. All of his things had been neatly put away, with a few exceptions. His broom, wand, and invisibility cloak were missing, as well as all of his clothing. Resignedly, he opened the oaken doors of the wardrobe, eyeing the clothing inside suspiciously. The garments were all very traditional wizarding robes, including strange undergarments made of some filmy material. He finally found a relatively simple set in black with silver embroidering along the hems. Rather than a robe over trousers like the Hogwarts uniform, these robes form-fitting around his torso and flowing around his legs. Harry grimaced as he fastened the silver buttons. A section I look like a damn girl. A section he griped, then blinked at the sibilant sounds. Harry took a deep breath and tried again. A section hello? A section more Parseltongue. He clapped both hands over his mouth, staring at his reflection in horror. Harry started violently when someone tapped softly on the door. A section Harry? A section Voldemort's voice made him shudder. A section go away. A section he hissed back, his voice shrill and panicked. A section you may come out and act in a civilized manner, or I will come in. A section. Harry dithered for a few moments, then finally squared his shoulders and opened the door. Voldemort gestured him towards the small table, which now held a silver tea service. Scowling, Harry seated himself. Voldemort poured himself a cup of tea, added a squeeze of lemon, and sipped, arms crossed. Harry refused to touch any of it. A section, how are you feeling? A section, Voldemort asked. A section, stop it. Stop hissing at me. Talk like a damn human being. A section, Harry snarled, noting vaguely that he sounded a bit like a overheated tea kettle. Voldemort gave him an amused look. You won't like it, he said. The sounds of human language grated unpleasantly on Harry's ears. It was nearly as bad as the noise from that damn golden egg. He gritted his teeth, clenching fistfuls of robe to keep his hands from covering his ears. A section, I know it is troubling, but it will pass. It is a side effect of the right. A section, what did you do to me? A section, Harry demanded. A section, I have made you heir to the House of Slytherin. A section, I thought you were the heir. A section, I was. In order to become Lord Slytherin, I needed an heir of my own. A section, what the hell? You can't just a broken bar just make people your heir just like that. A section, Voldemort looked at him sternly. A section, you were understandably distraught. However, I refuse to converse with you if you continue bellowing at me. A section, fine. A section, Harry muttered, glaring defiantly. A section, to make a long and very involved story short, your mother was my daughter. A section, Harry leapt to his feet. A section, don't you talk about my mother, you snake-faced son of a bitch. A section, Voldemort set down his teacup. A section, sit down, Harry. A section, no, I refuse to. A section, Harry's diatribe was cut short as a surge of power forced him bodily back into his seat. He opened his mouth to shriek his outrage, but no sound emerged. A section, since you cannot behave like an adult, you will sit and listen. A section, Voldemort picked up his teacup and took a sip. A section, I already had plans for conquest by the time I left Hogwarts. I knew that assuming the lordship of House Slytherin would be vital to these plans. To do so, I needed an heir. A section, the Dark Lord sipped from his cup again. A section, since you asked so politely. A section, he said, giving Harry a pointed look. A section, I will explain further. The founders of our line valued the continuance of the family very highly. Thus, no heir can assume the lordship until he has produced or selected an heir of his own. A section, Harry's mouth worked angrily at the word hour, but Voldemort ignored him. A section, unfortunately, during the building of my power base, I made quite a few enemies, and even more dubious allies. Consequently, any potential heir would be in grave danger. Those who opposed me or merely coveted my power had a vested interest in ensuring that I would not be able to assume the lordship. Thus, I fathered your mother with a powerful, intelligent witch. She, however, became a broken bar skittish, and fled, hiding your mother with a very distant squib relative. A section, Voldemort's expression grew distant for a moment. A section, Lilith had been attending Hogwarts for 3 years before I finally identified her. I had not expected her to be hidden so close to home. She was brilliant and powerful, all I had hoped for, but stubborn. A section, he sighed. A section, her death was a mistake I greatly regret. A section, her murder, you scaly bastard. Harry fumed, but the spell kept him quiet. Voldemort seemed oblivious to his angrily working mouth and grimacing face. A section, when you confronted me over the stone, I realized that you had potential to be my heir. Your second year and the revelation of your gift of Parseltongue convinced me. A section, Voldemort stirred his tea. A section, I am going to release your voice. If you do not behave in a civilized manner, this discussion is over. A section, Harry forced himself to take a few calming breaths before he replied. A section, why did you try to kill me in the tournament, then? A section, really, child, if I were going to kill you, I certainly would not have wasted my time with a year-long scheme so fraught with opportunities for missteps. No, I merely needed your presence and blood to complete my resurrection. A section, boot a broken bar, you a broken bar, you tried to kill me. A section, Voldemort merely looked at him. A section, you are not as foolish as you appear to be. Apply some of that cleverness. Back to the matter at hand. You are currently limited to Parseltongue as a side effect of your bonding with the patrons of our line. As the bond settles, you will once more be comfortable with human language. You may find an appreciation for Parseltongue, however. Some of our ancestors even composed literature in the language of snakes. A section, so all the heirs and lords have to be parselmouths? A section, Harry asked, fascinated despite himself, a section not necessarily to be an heir, and, eventually, a lord. One must be capable of a bond with our patrons. Some have merely had a sort of empathy with the serpents. Others were natural snake animagi, able to assume the form with little or no instruction. Parseltongue is the rarest of these gifts, and the most potent. A section Voldemort sounded smug. A section oh, a section Harry said, for lack of anything else. He wondered if that were true, or just Voldemort's arrogance talking. A section enough of that for now. You will probably need several days to recover from the rite. I suggest you work on your summer assignments, and do not overtax yourself. A section you want me to do homework? A section Harry demanded incredulously. Homework did not figure into this situation at all. A section knowledge is power, Harry. A section Voldemort rouse, moving with eerie grace to a door that materialized in the wall. Harry thrashed against the magical bonds, trying to will the door to remain in place. When he was finally freed, he snarled and kicked the now featureless wall.